In today's Take of the Day, we'll be reacting to Marcus Moore's interesting comments made on Media Day. Now, before we get into that, though, please like, subscribe, also hit the notification bell just so you can get the newest and the bonus content first. We put out content every day, so you won't miss any content here. Now, let's go ahead and jump right into this. Marcus Morris is one of those players that I look at where I say to myself, I like Marcus Morris. I even like his brother, Markeith. I like both of them. Actually, I like both of them on the same team together, honestly. I feel like that's when they both play their best. But I like Marcus Morris, and I like, his edge, his toughness, and I like the fact that he's a gritty type player. I feel like he's one of them type players that you need to win a championship. The only problem is I've been noticing and watching him for several years in the NBA, from the Phoenix Suns to the Celtics, now to the Clippers. And I always noticed there's always been a little inconsistency in his game. And maybe not so much on the other teams, but on the Clippers, I've noticed these last couple seasons, there's been inconsistency in his game. I mean, there's games where he'll drop 20 plus points and there's games where he'll drop 10 plus points. And it just isn't consistent enough to where teams can rely on his offense to get him over the hump. Because I said in my previous videos that last year in the playoffs, Reggie Jackson took over the third best scoring role on the Clippers. Of course, first is Kawhi, then is PG. And then now you have to look at it and say it's Reggie Jackson. Whereas most Clippers fans or basketball fans or whoever out there would have said Marcus Morris should be the third leading scorer on the team, because he definitely has the capability and he definitely has the talent to do so. But having the talent and the capability, that doesn't mean anything if you can't put it on display on the court. And, listening to Marcus Morris' comments, which you can go to clutchpoints.com, and check out and listen to his comments that he made on Media Day about, he said, he's dealing with tendinosis, in his knee issues. And he said if he were 100% healthy, the Clippers would have definitely been in the finals. Now, to me, when you make statements like that, you're putting a certain amount of pressure on yourself, because now you're saying, oh, okay, if I was 100%, we would have made the finals because I would have been more consistent in my game. Or possibly you're saying, okay, if I won't deal with knee issues going into last season, I would have played a lot more better, more consistent, and the team would have been able to rely on me more. And to me, I could be taking it that way. That could just be Khaliis' take, but it also can be a lot of other people's take as well. And this is what I'm saying. When you make comments like that, well, now the pressure on this season is going to mount on you even more, because you're saying that at Media Day. Everybody's listening to it. The fans, the organization, yourself, your teammates, everybody's listening to it. And now they're going to expect more consistency out of you this season. So going into this season, I feel like, Marcus Morris making those comments, I don't feel like it's going to overly hurt him in a worse way, but I do feel like it's going to put a little bit more pressure on him to be more consistent and more in tune to what is asked of him to do on a daily basis or a nightly basis. And now, like he also mentioned in his conference there, that everybody has to pick up now that Kawhi is not going to be there for a while. And that's definitely understood, and we all know that. But at the same time, you have to implement that and put that on the floor. You talking it and you doing it is two different things. So my thing is, I personally think Marcus Morris, I believe he can be more consistent. I believe he can be the third leading scorer on that team. But it's going to be really hard to get that back, because if Reggie Jackson continues to play the way he played last year in the playoffs, it's undoubtedly that Ty Lue's going to have to implement Reggie Jackson more in the offense than Marcus Morris, because Marcus Morris just has his days. If there's a 7-day week, if we're talking about a 7-day week where the Clippers play all 7 days, hypothetically, well, on average, only 2 or 3 games out of those 7 games, Marcus Morris plays to his ability. And that's really not good. It's sad to say that. But when you look at his tenure with the Clippers since he's been there, that's pretty much how he's been. And that's pretty much, how his game has been displayed. And that's just not what they need. They need somebody who can defend and they need somebody to knock down big shots consistently and who's going to take high quality shots, make them and take them. And that's who they think Marcus Morris is. And that's what they paid him big bucks for. Only problem is he really hasn't lived up to that, to his full capability. Now, I'm not giving up on Marcus Morris. Like I said, I like Marcus Morris. I think he brings a toughness to the Clippers that they wouldn't have if he wasn't there, especially now that they don't have Patrick Beverley anymore. So he's even more implemented now as that other primary defender on the team, because now Patrick Beverley's not there to keep the defensive side of the team, keep the edge of the team going the way it was when Patrick Beverley was there. So I expect more out of Marcus Morris. I expect more consistency. I know he was saying in the interview or the media day as well, nobody's 100% ever, but he said he feels a lot better. He said he feels better going into this season than he did last year. And if those are the words that he's going to use, and if that's the notion that he's putting out there, and if that's what, he's trying to implement to everybody, then now, like I said, you're putting extra added pressure on yourself, because now me, along with a lot of other fans, are just going to expect you to go out there and drop 17, 18 points consistently, shoot a high percentage, and do it in the playoffs. Because I guarantee you, I will say this, I don't know if Marcus Morris was 100% or not. I don't know if he was 100%, whether they go to the finals or not. But I will say this, if Marcus Morris is playing the way he's supposed to, and the way that he's getting paid, they wouldn't have been down 0-2 every series. I do know that, because honestly, a lot of those games in Dallas and Utah, Marcus Morris was the one that really didn't show up. I mean, PG didn't shoot great in a lot of those games. He had some games where he didn't show up to me as good as he could have as well, but he still was aggressive and he still was somewhat being Paul George. But Marcus Morris, honestly, there were games where he had flailed out and flamed out, seemed like, where his jump shot wouldn't fall and his defense was falling or not playing up to par as well. His defense wasn't up to par as it should be either. And those type of games and those type of moments is really crucial for the Clippers, because you can't always depend on Kawhi to dig you out of an 0-2 hole in every series and expect Kawhi to just turn into, just being great, for every series, because Kawhi shouldn't have to be great every series. That's the reason why you have a team. That's the reason why you have second and third best players on a team. And that's the reason why everybody has to carry their own weight on a team, because when it comes time for Kawhi Leonard and Paul George or whoever else on the team to be special, yeah, they can do that. But at the same time, Marcus Morris has to do his part too. You're getting paid high bucks to be consistent. You're not getting paid high bucks to flame out 3 or 4 games out of a 7-game series. You know what I'm saying? You're not getting paid high bucks for that. And Marcus Morris has been in the league long enough to know he has to produce. And I can tell you, I personally think if Marcus Morris doesn't play up to his level of potential this year, I think he might be one of the pieces on the hot seat and on the trading block going into next season. Because it's like, what is the point? $64 million is a lot of money to a lot of people. And I can tell you, it's even more money to a player who knows he's playing inconsistent and not up to the level of the money that he's being paid. It's almost like robbery to a degree. So it's like, I hope Marcus Morris plays up to his level and his potential, but even more so, I hope he plays up to the level and the potential I know he has in the playoffs. Because I do believe the Clippers are going to make the playoffs. So I know a lot of people are saying that they might not. And of course, nothing's a guarantee, but I do believe they're going to find a way to get in. I don't think they're going to be in any play-in tournament. Although, like I said, there's no guarantees. But I mean, I really hope they put themselves in, good position, as good position as possible to, be the highest seed they can going into the playoffs. But even though it's going to be hard without Kawhi Leonard, but still, I do think Marcus Morris is on the hot seat. And I do think a lot of eyes are on him, because when Kawhi Leonard is out, you're one of the guys that a lot of people look to make up for some of Kawhi Leonard's points. Kawhi Leonard can score 29, 30 points a game. Marcus Morris has to at least average 18 this season, and he has to average the same amount going into the playoffs. And if Marcus Morris shoots 44, 45% during the season, well, he's going to have to shoot 40, 42, 45% in the playoffs as well. And it just can't be anything else, because if this team wants to take it to another level, if this team wants to win a championship, players like him have to come along for the ride. You can't get 21 points from Marcus Morris in this game, and then next game you get 12 points. It just can't work that way. Even if Kawhi Leonard is there, as we saw last year in the playoffs, they were down 0-2 every series because of his inconsistency, because he was supposed to be the third best scorer on the team that they were relying on. Luckily for the Clippers, Reggie Jackson came along for the ride. Luckily, Reggie Jackson flipped that switch and put it in high gear and said, hey, I'm going to be the third leading scorer on this team, and I'll give you consistency. Then the Clippers started playing a lot better. And then the Clippers looked like, wow, even though they were down 0-2, they had a guy in Reggie Jackson that can come out there and put up some big points and keep them in games while Kawhi and PG sit down and take a breather and come back and finish games off. That's the reason why the Clippers went as far as they did in the playoffs and made it to the Western Conference Finals, because Reggie Jackson was a big part of that. And I like Reggie Jackson, and I hope Reggie Jackson continues to play the way he did last year, because for some reason, if Marcus Morris comes into this season, even though he say he feel more healthy and his knee is feeling better and, you know, all these things he's saying, if he comes into this season and he's inconsistent, I really hope Reggie Jackson picks up where he left off last year, because if he doesn't, then the Clippers are really going to be in trouble, because there's nobody to make up for inconsistencies and mistakes now, because Kawhi Leonard is your best player and he makes up for all that. He makes up for Paul George's mistakes a lot of times. A lot of times Paul George goes through quarters where he's scoreless, goes through quarters in a game where he's a non-factor on defense and offense. So it's like Kawhi makes up for him as well. So now that you don't have your big dog there in Kawhi Leonard, players like Marcus Morris, it's no excuses this year. It's all or nothing. All gas, no brakes. That's pretty much the mentality he has to have. He has to go in every game aggressive, but he has to shoot a decent to a high percentage, and he has to let it carry over in the playoffs. Because I will say this, if Reggie Jackson could play the way he played last year in the playoffs continuously and take it into the playoffs this year, along with Marcus Morris being a little bit more consistent, with Paul George playing the way he did in the playoffs, and they get Kawhi back, it is going to be really hard to beat the Los Angeles Clippers. I don't give a damn what team they play. If they can get the consistency out of Marcus Morris and continual of Reggie Jackson playing the way he played last year, and get Kawhi healthy for him to come back and do what Kawhi does, and PG somewhere in the middle there doing his thing as the second best player, I don't care what team they play, they are going to be hard to beat. And that's just facts. It's no other way to look at it. It's no other way to say it. It's no other way to put that out there. It is facts. They are going to be a very, very hard team to knock off in the playoffs. And if I know a lot of Lakers fans and a lot of Nets fans are already putting those teams in the finals, well, as you should, because that's your team. That's who you root for. That's who you ride and die for. You definitely should do that. But Clippers fans definitely have a right to feel like they have an opportunity as well, because this team, if they can get these players in line, and if Ty Lue can get the best out of all these players with more and keep them healthy, I'm telling you, it's going to be really hard to beat the Clippers, because the Clippers are the deepest team in the NBA besides the Nets. Now the Nets added Patty Mills, and I think they added maybe a couple more players. I think LaMarcus Aldridge is coming back too, I think. Now they added those two players, maybe a couple more. Now they're now they're one of the deepest teams in the NBA. But besides them, it's the Clippers. The Clippers are, if the Clippers aren't the first deepest team in the NBA, they're number two, because you got Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard, all them coming off the bench with Serge Ibaka as a backup to Zubac. I mean, well, according to the starting lineup anyway, that Ty Lue is implementing in the preseason anyway. But I mean, still, you have a lot of depth on that team where, you know, if your superstars sit down, you know, you still have depth on the team where you could put up points while the superstars are sitting down and getting a breather. And that's what you want. You want a bench mob. You want a team that has all across the board, there's talent, and the Clippers are talented all across the board. And this is another season. They're all together, just about making another run at it. Like I said, I still wish they had Patrick Beverley. I still think they're going to miss Patrick Beverley's defense and his ways and how he plays in certain instances. But if they can get what they need out of Marcus Morris, he plays defense too, and he's a better shooter than Patrick Beverley. So that's the reason why I thought Patrick Beverley was so valuable, because of Marcus Morris' inconsistency. Because Marcus Morris he could score better than Patrick Beverley, but when Marcus Morris isn't knocking down his jump shot, his defense isn't any better. And that's just how it goes with Marcus Morris. If his jump shot is falling, his defense is better that game. That's just the way it is. But what you got out of Patrick Beverley, he wasn't that good of a shooter, but his defense was always pesty, feisty, and good, and made an impact in every game, whether he scored or not. So now that Patrick Beverley isn't there, you really have to command more out of Marcus Morris now, because you need his defense, his feistiness defense on one end that Patrick Beverley doesn't give you anymore. But you also need his 17 to 20 points on the opposite end, because Kawhi Leonard isn't there to make up for the mistakes or the inconsistency that he's been having. But hey, that's my take on the situation there. Leave any comments in the comment section as always, and we'll talk about it.